The following is a paid program by the Whitley Law Firm. Welcome to Attorneys on Call, the program that gives you free legal information from the Whitley Law Firm. Now, here's your host, Luis Garcia.
Hello and welcome to Attorneys on Call. I'm Luis Garcia, your host for today. Thank you for joining us. We have a special topic to cover today. I want to remind you first that the number on the screen is the number you can call at any time during the show or after that will get you a free case evaluation from Whitley Law Firm and the Stacy Miller Law Group. With us, like I said, Ben Whitley, thank you for being here. Stacy Miller, thank you for joining us and being part of the group at Attorneys on Call now. Today we're talking about the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. Now, that is a recent law that was enacted on behalf of all the veterans that served at Camp Lejeune here in North Carolina, near Jacksonville. Now, that is a topic that's been in the news and the headlines a lot due to the contaminated water that was found there from 1953 to 1987. Spans a lot of decades. Right. Now, Ben, can you tell us a little bit, before we get into the topic about Camp Lejeune and the contaminated water, tell us a little bit about the Whitley Law Firm and, you know, your team, the team that you're building along with Stacy Miller here.
Sure, and thank you, Luis. You know, my dad has been down in East North Carolina, practiced law almost 50 years, and so we've had a presence in Eastern North Carolina for a very long time, protecting folks down there. And, you know, we all have heard about the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. You can't not, with all the advertising that has been going on. Stacy and I probably can share with many of you, when this was going on, when a lot of the advertising was going on, it was really distasteful. It was too much. It kind of clouded the real issue, which was finally, after so many years, that there is some relief, albeit it's a short window, but there is some relief now, as everyone knows, for the Camp Lejeune veterans. So I wanted to, when I thought of a dream team, I wanted to make sure that we could protect the North Carolinians with North Carolina lawyers, because these cases are so unique, these Camp Lejeune cases, because they've already told us in the law the courthouse that we have to go to. You know, usually lawyers get to choose, or, you know, it depends on where the person was or the person caused a harm. But here in this law, it says you got to go right to the Eastern District of North Carolina, Federal Eastern District of North Carolina.
Anywhere you're in the country, this is where it's going to be.
It doesn't matter if you're living now in California, you've got to come to this courthouse. And this courthouse right in Raleigh. You know, they got a couple other little district offices in Wilmington and Elizabeth City, and New Bern and Raleigh. But I wanted to find and to bring together a dream team for our folks that had the best lawyers with experience in federal courts, experience with these North Carolina judges, these North Carolina juries, because the North Carolina juries are the ones that are going to decide the value of these cases. And
Stacy, you're here in North Carolina. You've been a lawyer for many years. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your law firm?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Raleigh. I've been practicing here going on 30 years, and so I have spent my career in the courtrooms of the Eastern District of North Carolina. So very familiar with our juries, our judges. We have outstanding judges here. And so I think, you know, it brings a value.
Sure.
We're more effective here in North Carolina than we are, say, in California, because this is our home turf.
Now, it is an issue that affects Americans throughout the country, not just in North Carolina, but the court is here in North Carolina. Right, exactly. So everyone will have to eventually come to North Carolina to go through these trials, if it goes to a trial. Right,
and we recently had a hearing, and I will tell you this, we have outstanding judges in the Eastern District of North Carolina, and they made it perfectly clear that they want the system to be efficient, and they want justice served for these men and women who have served our country.
Sure, it has to be done. Now, if you're just tuning in, it's 1-800-785-5000, the number on your screen. Call for more information. Now, let's get into a little bit about the background, the history of Camp Lejeune, and what happened there from 1953 to 1987.
Sure, and I think just as a refresher for those that do probably have heard about this, but just kind of to give us a bird's eye view, so to speak. Sure. As you mentioned, there was a contamination that the government has confirmed through their own reports. It was called the ATSDR, but they had made a report where they tested and they found certain chemicals that were in the water at certain exposure rates during that period of time, the 1953 to 1987. And these contaminants were left there by various industrial components. One in particular was a dry cleaner that was across the street from Camp Lejeune, ABC Dry Cleaners, that leaked the specific chemicals, the TCE and the other chemicals that are these organic compounds that have caused these types of diseases, leaking them into the ground wells, into the water. But in addition to that, dry cleaners, they were dumping jet fuel. They were dumping all sorts of stuff, and the benzene and different chemicals that the government itself was able to identify in certain locations across the base. And because of a long history and well-known documented history of diseases and illnesses and deaths, the worst story, of course, are the babies and the things
the infants and kids.
Yeah, and everything that started getting folks' attention to it. And but the story of Camp Lejeune is so much more nuanced and detailed, and don't have enough time to talk about it now. But it's the cover-up, the government not telling people about what there was in that water, and then there were attempts to try and make it right. You know, the VA created a system back in 2017 where they tried to identify certain payoffs for a disability related to these illnesses at Camp Lejeune, but that wasn't enough. That was a very limited amount.
A lot of them were denied.
And a lot of
veterans who served their country, a lot of Marines that were stationed at Camp Lejeune were denied some of these benefits.
Correct.
And like you said, Department of Defense.
Nobody was taking care of it.
Nobody was taking care of the veterans or their families.
Correct.
So this is an issue that affects not only the veterans, but their families, and also anyone employed, any civilians employed at the base during that time, right?
That's correct.
So contractors as well.
Right.
Anyone that worked or lived around Camp Lejeune near Jacksonville in North Carolina could be eligible for these benefits.
That's correct. And so go ahead.
Yeah, and Louise, I want to make an important point here. You mentioned that VA benefits that some of these folks might be getting. I've been asked a lot, specifically the specific question. If I participate in the Camp Lejeune Justice Act recovery, will it affect my benefits? And the answer is no, it will not affect
the benefits continue for the
Yes.
for the family and the veteran as is.
I mean, it's a fair question because these folks have been harmed, and some of them are finally getting some benefits, and they don't want to lose those benefits. And so I understand the question. But this Camp Lejeune Act is designed not to affect those benefits. It's to be on top of the benefits.
Great.
Right.
Well, that's the topic for today, and we want to thank our viewers for joining us. Again, 1-800-785-5000. If you have a relative or if your family has lived or been through the military base here in North Carolina called Camp Lejeune, now it goes back years, as we mentioned, but there could be family members still, sons, daughters, families that were stationed there, lived there, have moved on to another place, but had a tie to Camp Lejeune. You want to pay attention on today's show. We're going to come back with more information for you and see how people that were affected by the contaminated water and the diseases it caused, how they can get some resources and help. The Justice Act was approved recently, so that's the new angle from that.
And that we've been in, this has been going on now for some period of time.
For decades and years. So we have new information for you. We want to remind you to stick around. We'll be right back with more on Attorneys on Call. You're watching Attorneys on Call. The number on the screen is 1-800-785-5000. That's the phone number you need to dial for a free case evaluation. Once again, it's 1-800-785-5000. If you need more information on the Camp Lejeune Act, please check the website. It also has a lot of the answers to your questions, LejeuneRelief.com. And we have with us in studio Ben Whitley and Stacy Miller again. Stacy from the Miller Law Group. Now, Stacy, can you tell us a little bit about some of these hearings you've been to and some of the people that have been affected by the Camp Lejeune toxic water situation?
Yeah, so we're seeing a whole variety of cancers, but predominantly we're seeing bladder cancer, kidney cancer, kidney disease, Parkinson's disease. And so, as you drink water, that's what filters the water out of your body. And so we're seeing a lot of these, and it's been quite devastating on these folks. And I can tell you, unfortunately, we have cases where the whole family, kids, mother, father, all got cancer from drinking the toxic water at Camp Lejeune.
Now, we've mentioned that this all started back in decades ago, 50s through 80s, but it took years to get to this point. Now, how does a family of 4 all get cancer from an issue that happened decades ago?
Well, the latency period in some of these cancers are years.
And you can see the cancers on the screen there.
Right. So if you drink or bathe in or swim in this toxic water, you don't get cancer the next day. It takes a while for these toxicities to build up and, in fact, these cancers to be formed. And look, and some folks are no longer with us. Sure. I think that the span was 1953 to 1987, and those who served our country, it was at Camp Lejeune in the early 50s. A lot of those folks are no longer with us and have died from some of these diseases that was caused by the toxicity.
Now, the new information we have for folks is the Justice Act, which was passed not that long ago. Mm-hmm. Ben, can you tell us a little bit about that and how the clock is ticking pretty much for people? Yes. And if they've been involved in the Camp Lejeune issue and maybe are on the fence about calling you, they might be afraid of lawyers, and they don't want to lose their benefits. How can somebody just be at ease about reaching out?
And I recognize that. I've met with those very types of folks that have told me in conversations, and that's one of the things that Stacy and I are offering is if you want to meet with us in person, if you want to meet with us in our offices in person, or we can come to you.
Or via Zoom.
Or via Zoom. But we're going to make ourselves available to you.
Sure.
And that's the first step, which is accessibility, on how we can earn the trust of folks that may not like lawyers, that may not trust lawyers, that don't trust this whole process because of those ads that they saw,
Correct.
And some of those ads were misleading, Luis. Some of the ads said that billions in settlements have been paid. Not a single, as of the recording of this show, not a single settlement has been paid. We hope that changes, but there was such misleading information. So I can imagine that there are folks out there that don't maybe want to get involved, don't trust the system. So here's what I'm doing for them. We are committing to being very accessible, that you will be able to talk to an attorney or meet with an attorney. We've been in North Carolina for a long time, both of our firms. So there's a level of trust that we've established that we hope that folks can feel comfortable with using a firm that they know of, not one of these out-of-state law firms.
So tell us a little bit about who qualifies, because some people may have already been through the process and not gotten any benefits.
Right.
Who qualifies, Stacy?
Well, if you lived at Camp Lejeune or served at Camp Lejeune or were a civil servant, worked on Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1987, you're eligible if you have contracted one of these diseases. And I think we had a list of the diseases up earlier, but the ones that we predominantly are seeing are Parkinson's disease, bladder cancer, kidney disease, certain in utero diseases, kids contracted in utero. And if you've passed from these diseases, it turns into what's called a wrongful death claim.
Sure.
But there are other diseases other than the ones I've just mentioned as well.
What about if I had somebody in my family that served during that time? I didn't serve there personally, but my grandfather was there during that time. And now I'm finding out maybe my parent has one of these diseases or illnesses. How would I go about doing consulting with you?
Well, right. You can give us a call. There's certain steps you have to take. For instance, if your grandfather served and he's passed, his estate's eligible to bring a claim, right?
Okay.
Happy to talk to you about it, even if you decide you don't want to proceed with a lawyer. Free consultation, right? We're very passionate about this topic because we know just the horrific amount of toxicity that was dumped into the water at Camp
And
Lejeune.
it hits close to home here in North Carolina with a few military bases, and one of them being Camp Lejeune.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up an hour and a half from Camp Lejeune. So it's just being from Eastern North Carolina, it is so important to me to make sure that people have the right, honorable, ethical representation and to get great results. I mean, that's at the end of the day what we're really trying to do.
So when someone calls in to the number 1-800-785-5000, what's the process after I call you?
Sure. So we have trained specialists that are on the phone. You'll pick when you talk to them, they're just going to ask some very basic information. And remember, Louise, any conversation, even with our folks on the phone, is confidential. It's part of that attorney-client relationship. So you can feel comfortable explaining some of your health details. They're going to ask a couple of questions, and then they can tell you fairly soon whether or not that you would potentially qualify what we believe would be a qualification under the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. And we would recommend that they hire us. And if they choose to hire us, our team, both law firms, you get two law firms for the price of one, that we would send electronic documents, or they could come into the office, and it's a matter of signing some papers. And there's no upfront fees, Luis. You don't have to pay a retainer. We are only paid a fee if we are successful in obtaining a settlement or a verdict in your case.
It can't be any easier for somebody to reach out, even if you think or doubt maybe this is something that would be able to help you. LejeuneRelief.com is the website we've set up specially for this case. And the number again, 1-800-785-5000. We urge you to call if you or a family member served at Camp Lejeune during that period of time. So we talked about the progression of some of these diseases like Parkinson's or cancer. It's not an onset that's right away. It could take years. What about somebody who served but is fairly healthy and doesn't know if they have one of these diseases? Can they qualify or find out if they could get some of this benefit?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is you have to have a diagnosed condition.
So the first step is getting that diagnosis.
There has to be a diagnosis.
It has to be a diagnosis. And I will reiterate, and we talked about this earlier, but I think it's really important because I've spoken to so many of the folks that we represent. If you're getting VA benefits, you will continue to get VA benefits. What you received under this Camp Lejeune Justice Act will not affect those benefits, and that's really important.
Right, and that it kind of goes back, Luis, that there was so much bad information at the beginning when this law was first out. Even veteran groups that are for the benefit of veterans were potentially giving wrong information out. And I don't think they weren't doing it intentionally. They just didn't know. But that skepticism from some of the more trusted VA groups, I think, put a chilling effect on a lot of people that have potential claims out there. And Stacy and I are here to tell you, you are not going to lose your government benefits. We're not going to let that happen. And if there is a settlement presentation ultimately at the end, or if there's a verdict, we will have opinions for you about any of your government benefits. We're just not going to put you in a position, because we know how hard it is to get those benefits.
And some of that past information and commercials were not even from lawyers. They were coming from firms just trying to
it's
hook
another
and bait
point.
you.
I mean, unfortunately, some North Carolinians kind of got caught up into what's called a lead generation, which there were companies that put on TV commercials that looked like law firms, but they weren't law firms. And if I would say this, if you find yourself, if you're out there and you think you've signed up with a law firm, but you're not getting any kind of communication, here's the key: you have not spoken to a lawyer yet. If you have signed up for one of these out-of-state firms and you have not spoken to a lawyer yet, you may want to look at changing lawyers. And that's not, I don't say that very lightly, but you do have that right. And that's for the folks that have been caught up in this lead generation situation that we have seen, and we are helping some of those folks folks that have come to hire us after going through that. We're helping them with that.
And that's a very good point, and very important that you call somebody who's local, who knows the community, and who's going to be on your side. So we urge you to call 1-800-785-5000. Once again, the number is 1-800-785-5000 for a free case evaluation. Ben Whitley, Stacy Miller is with us. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Visit the website, LejeuneRelief.com. You're watching Attorneys on Call, and the topic today is Camp Lejeune Justice Act. There's been some new developments in the Justice Act, and we mentioned before, Ben, that the clock is ticking. There really is some urgency for people that qualify for these benefits to get on board and call the number and check the website and really get involved now, because there's a statute of limitations.
Yeah, so August 2024. And, you know, what for us, for Stacy and I to be able to handle your case well, we're going to need it. We're going to need to look at the file before that, even before that date, because there is a lot that has to be prepared before it gets filed with the Navy. So you have to file your case with the Navy. It's just a kind of a procedural issue before that August 2024 date. And we have to look at your medical records. We have to establish your location in Camp Lejeune, and then we have to establish the medical issues. And that takes a little bit of time. So we're really encouraging folks right now that if you are waiting, if you are holding out, that now is really the time to act, mainly because we do have a statute of limitations. The time clicks.
And they're individual cases. You're going to look at them one by one.
These aren't class action.
This is not a group class action. Yeah. So this is individualized care and attention that you're going to get from the Whitley Law Firm. 1-800-785-5000, the number to call, and LejeuneRelief.com is the website for more information. If you're just joining us, this is a topic that's been in the headlines and the news. You might have seen it online, but new developments are causing us to get this information out there. Free information for you today on Attorneys on Call. Now, some of these veterans, I'll refer to you, Stacy, some of these veterans that were stationed at Camp Lejeune from those years we mentioned, 53 to 87, they're getting up in age. And a lot of these people are dying while they're waiting. What can we do to get people to sign up now?
Well, I can say two things to that, Luis. It's a very good point. A lot of these folks are getting older, right? And that's one of the things that the judge mentioned. And that's why he wants justice served quickly for these folks. Because these folks need some money to help themselves out now, right? And folks are dying of these diseases. And if your loved one has passed, the claim still survives, right? That's important to know.
But that's important for the family.
Right. It's very important for the family, because a lot of folks have dedicated their lives to the loved ones who's been suffering from these cancers or Parkinson's disease, and so they deserve to be.
And it's kind of like they want to honor the ones that I've talked to, because we've lost 10 to 15 folks just in the time we've been representing people in Camp Lejeune, it's tough.
We mentioned some of the things that would qualify for the benefits, which is, of course, being a service member, having served in the Marines or the military while you're stationed at Camp Lejeune. Also contractors, also civilian employees that were at the base.
They just have to have 30 days of exposure.
And it doesn't have to be continuous days. It could be on-off days. So as long as you were at the base for 30 days, we know what the situation is. It was the contaminated water that caused all these illnesses.
And the government, I mean, they're going to admit to. Stacy, do you think? I mean, they're probably going to have to admit to some of this, and some of the answers that they've already filed, they've admitted that they knew that the water was contaminated.
So the Justice Act now almost is a given for people that.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a given. You still have to prove your case. You know? And that's the interesting thing about the Justice Act. It just gave people a right to file a lawsuit that they never had before. But they still have to file a lawsuit with an attorney, and they still have to prove their case. So it's different. It's different like administrative or the VA, where you would go in and you have an evaluation, assign a percentage. You really can't contest it. This is a full-on lawsuit with juries and judges.
Right, and that's why we pulled our resources together, because Ben's been practicing here in North Carolina. His firm's been in existence for a while. I've been here for almost 30 years. And look, these are North Carolina claims in North Carolina courtrooms, in front of North Carolina judges, in front of North Carolina juries. And so this is our backyard.
Sure. Give us another example of one of the families or persons you're dealing with.
Yeah, most recently I spoke with a gentleman 2 weeks ago. He's 49. He's been battling Parkinson's disease for quite some time, and unfortunately we lost him last week. At 49.
This is tragic. This
Yeah,
is something that affects.
It's really heartbreaking with this practice because every so often we're signing, our firm will send out with cards and flowers because we're actually losing our clients. And I've had conversations with the families of the lost loved one that want to pursue and continue the claim because they want to do so in their honor, because they know that that individual had been waiting. They know that they had known about that water. A lot of these folks know just as much about the water as any expert does. They have all their files. And so families are still pursuing it for loved ones who've passed in honor of what their struggle was,
Sure.
and in order to make sure that the government still has to make an acknowledgement for their family.
So we remind you that these claims remain active, they remain part of the system, and the family would get those benefits.
You know, it's hard. We've committed to speak to everybody that we represent, and it's going to take some time. And I've been doing a lot of that every week, you know, and I hear these stories, and it's really hard not to get angry on their behalf.
Of course.
And we've become really passionate for these folks. They have, you know, served our country, and we've allowed this to happen, and to, you know, it needs to be made right.
Sure. They served our country, and they deserve all these benefits, of course. So it's important that you call 1-800-785-5000. I just want to remind folks that you guys are based here in Raleigh, and North Carolina is home and has been home for years. You know, why is it important, Ben, to get a law firm that is based locally?
Well, you know, one day soon, Stacy is going to be talking to 12 people, all chosen from Eastern North Carolina. And Stacy's going to be talking to those 12 people about one of our clients and what they should do for them. And he's going to have to ask them to take care of our client. And those folks that are sitting in that box of 12, they are from North Carolina. They are most likely born and raised in Eastern North Carolina. And nothing against California, Luis, but they may not respond well to a California lawyer telling them what they should do. And you know, that's just the reality of things. I mean, it's a crazy world right now, but I think the local people respond to the folks locally that they know, that have shared values, and that we all have been in this struggle together with Camp Lejeune.
Well, I want to thank both of you for providing us with this great information, free information as usual here on Attorneys on Call. Check the website, please, LejeuneRelief.com for more information, or call the number on the screen, 1-800-785-5000. I want to thank you for being here with us today. Thank you both, Stacy, Ben, as usual, for joining us. And once again, call the number on the screen, 1-800-785-5000. I want to thank you for being here. Luis Garcia, your host. We'll see you next time on Attorneys on Call.